we try to continue to stay hopeful in this time because it is a challenge to be a young person and think about mental health and well-being and going to school and what my family is going through. As young people, we continue to let folks know, hey, how do we continue to not only address a lot of the problems that are going on, but also how do we, move forward with the solutions.
Greetings, my name is Manuel Arciniegas, Executive Director of Communities for Just Schools Fund, and this is our podcast, Beyond the Bell, Organizing for Education Justice. Our podcast is committed to bringing you the voices, dreams, and brilliance of community organizers activating the public will for education justice. We know our communities deserve to feel safe and dignified, irrespective of their race, economic status, zip code, gender, or ability, or even their documentation status. However, this is not the case for the majority of young people who are youth of color, queer, disabled, or even undocumented. Today's public schools and communities are not yet safe places to learn, grow, and thrive, but organizers around the country are working to change this. And so, how do we get there? Today, we're going to hear about the hopes and dreams, victories, and collective wisdom of organizers from VOYCE, a project of Communities United, and from Communities United proper. They're based in Chicago, Illinois, and they've been working long and hard to ensure that Black and Brown young people, queer immigrant youth, and their families feel loved, safe, and invested in, not criminalized, punished, or pushed out. Our first guest is Meyiya Coleman, project coordinator of VOYCE and Communities United. She began her journey successfully advocating for more mental and behavioral health resources into schools, making historic changes in the Chicago public school system. Inspired by her grandmother, Meyiya works tirelessly to create change and support youth empowerment within her community. Hi, Meyiya. Welcome to the pod. How are you?
Hi, Manuela. I am awesome, and thank you for having me be a part of this. This is amazing.
We're so happy you're here. And we're delighted that you're joined by your colleague and movement comrade, Jenny Arwarde. Jenny Arwarde is the co-executive director of Communities United. Jenny brings more than 18 years of organizing experience to her role as co-ED of Communities United. She directs CU's Healing Through Justice approach to advancing transformative systems change and leadership development. In her tenure at the organization, Jenny has supported countless young people and adult allies in creating the nation's most comprehensive statewide school discipline reform. She's advanced innovative solutions to keep families in their homes and preserve long-term affordable rental housing, advance health equity, and much, much more. Jenny, welcome, and so happy you're here with us.
Thanks so much, Manuela. Really happy to be here with you too.
So a little bit about both of you. Maybe Meyiya, can we start with you? Can you tell everybody listening a little bit about yourself? How did you find your way to Communities United and VOYCE? And how has this organization supported your growth as a human in the world?
So I have been a part of Communities United since I was about 15 or so. I am now a 26-year-old old lady, so the young people say. And I got involved through the police accountability work that Communities United was doing at first. I come from a community and family full of organizers, and my family was really heavily involved in organizing after my grandmother was shot in the head. And so she got super involved in ending gun violence and things like that. And then she slowly moved over to the police accountability work is where she got involved with Communities United. And she would drag me to a lot of these meetings. And I was just like, oh my goodness, I want to do the work, but I really just don't want to be in these meetings. And so I continued to come because it was just, it was very powerful to be a part of a space where people were building community and they were in these spaces sharing their whole selves and bringing their whole selves to the space. And that truly had inspired me. And I remember being a part of these spaces and I felt truly empowered when leaving. And I was just like, you know what? I don't think I want to go. And so I slowly moved over into the VOYCE work where we started working on HB 4208 and the Rethink and Safety campaign. And we started talking a lot about how SB 100 had passed and just all of these different things. And being able to go to Springfield and talking to legislators, I was like, wait a minute. I never knew that us young people coming from North Rondale could do things like this. And so it was definitely something that I was super intrigued with. I was intrigued with and admirable of the young people in the spaces that were not only creating for each other, but they were bringing their own seats to the table of decision making. And I really wanted to do that. And I was just so grateful for that space being created for me. And I wanted to create that same space for other young people. And so now, as a 26-year-old woman, I get to not only be a part of those same spaces that I once was as a young person, but I also get to help create those spaces alongside Jenny, Raul, and LaQuanda, Maria, and the rest of our folks over at Communities United and VOYCE.
Thank you, Meyiya. And may I ask your grandmother's name?
Her name is Gloria Muldrow.
We just want to lift up Miss Gloria and in all her glory and power. It's so beautiful that she was your first teacher in community organizing. And I'm sorry about your loss. And I know that she's doing her work on the other side, supporting your power and your leadership and getting our communities free. So thank Miss Gloria for her legacy. And thank you for telling us your story.
Definitely.
Now, Jenny, can you tell us a little bit about you? You've been helping folks organize. You've lived in multiple cities in this beautiful country that has a lot of work to do towards justice. So whose legacy do you stand on? And what life experiences brought you to working on behalf of safety and healing for communities?
So first of all, thanks, Meyiya, for sharing your powerful story as always. I think that in this work, we rely on the power of our histories and our connection to those who came before us to really ground us and inspire us in the work. I grew up originally in New York City, but I've been in Chicago for over 25 years now, where I have deep roots and family, a daughter who continues to inspire me, who's 15 now. And for me, I connect deeply to Meyiya's story and the story of other young people that we work with, because even though we may have different life journeys and paths, I think that the experiences that I had as a child, experiencing childhood trauma and the struggles that my parents had, and at the same time seeing how my parents were really focused on bettering not only themselves, but their communities, through all that struggle. It really grounded me in wanting to do something. But as a child, I didn't know what I could do. And I think that that's a lot of the space that we see, the young folks that we work with, is that folks want to do something. They want to be connected and involved. And so often those spaces aren't accessible and available. And so for myself, I felt very isolated. I carried a lot of stress as a child with what my family was going through. And it wasn't until I was in my early 20s, after I graduated from college and ended up in a fellowship program doing community organizing, that for the first time in my life, I actually felt like I had power to do something with others, to create change in the systems around us. And for me, that's what sustained me in the work now for over 25 years, because despite all of the immense challenges that we face on a daily basis, I think Meyiya and I, you can tell me if you agree, Meyiya, but I think that we feel blessed every day that we can wake up feeling hopeful and feeling connected with others, and feel like we're actually taking action and participating to really bring to life the world that we envision.
Definitely, Jenny. Definitely.
That's beautiful to hear, Meyiya. And I know this is a tough season for organizing and just for living in our communities, as beautiful and powerful as they are, and as grateful as we all are for our people. We know there's some challenges. And so I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about both the good and bad that youth in Chicago are facing today, and how are your organizations responding to the challenges that young people are facing and the opportunities?
Definitely. I think that for me, this work is not just about the things that we're facing, even though that it is our lives. We try to continue to stay hopeful in this time, because it is a challenge to be a young person and have to be in this time and think about mental health and well-being and going to school and all of those and what my family is going through and all of those different things. And as young people, we continue to, thrive and work to let folks know, hey, here is what you can do and here are the solutions to those different things and how to support young people in this time. And I would definitely say those are a lot of the things that we're currently working on right now is like, how do we continue to not only address a lot of the problems that are going on, but also how do we, move forward with the solutions? And right now, young people are working on addressing the fact that there has been a threat to deploy the National Guard, as well as ICE is heavily present within our communities, and our young people are tirelessly working every day. Although we have a lot of these things going on that we think about the solutions and be very solution oriented when it comes to mental health and well-being. So we've had a couple of series of roundtables where students are able to not only address these things, but talk about the root causes, as well as talk about how to best support young people's health and well-being, as well as their families. And so young people have been really doing a lot of work around addressing these things within the roundtable. They've talked about how the budget has been a big thing that, the schools were talking about when it pertains to like cutting different things, or whether it was teachers, staff, or different things like that. Young people have said, you know what, we need our teachers. We need these, intentional relationships. We need folks to, really bring us to the tables to talk about what we need and not tell us what we need. So they talked about those things at our first roundtable, and young people did an amazing job of just really talking about, hey, we understand that there's a lot of uncertainty around where the budget is going to go, but here's how to keep young people in mind, and here's how to truly support our mental health and well-being in the process. And then our part 2 roundtable in our series, where young people were able to really address the concerns around ICE being heavily in our communities, and how can we continue to support our communities, our immigrant communities, and how can we continue to come together as Black and Brown young people across Chicago and support each other and support our families. And so they were able to really just, hone in on the conversation of as Black and Brown young people who do come from different communities but are facing some of the same things. How do we continue to really create these spaces where young people are the ones that make the decisions and are the ones who come together and talk about how to strongly support us moving forward? And yeah, I think that those are some challenges. Young people were able to come up with the solutions of our mental health and well-being needs to really be supported in these times. And yeah, they are continuing to do the work. They are actually trying to move forward with creating a public meeting where not only do they get to talk about these things, but they also get to create a space of support.
Thank you, Meyiya, for bringing us into the present moment, right? Like, so at the date of the recording of this podcast, it's the beginning of October of 2025. And over the last 2 days, we know that there have been really dramatic raids in the South Shore neighborhood in Chicago. We heard that these raids woke children up and their families out of their beds in the late night and dragged them out, barely dressed, zip-tied our children, and began the process of separating families. We also know that community has resisted and fought back. We saw protesters go to the local detention center and videotape ICE agents, and some of them have been quoted to literally say, F them kids, that this is the posture and the orientation towards our children. And so we understand that sentiment that shows systems that don't love children is rampant, right? And we also know there are folks who leading systems who actually truly care and are trying to figure out how do they transform the culture, the ethos, the policies of their systems to actually serve our communities. And y'all have been organizing them, educating them, pushing them along, showing another road and another way to do this. And so I bring that up, Jenny, because I think it's like at the heart of like y'all's vision for healing. So can you tell us a little bit about VOYCE and Communities United vision for healing in Chicago for your young people in your communities? And how did that vision help generate the coalition-led work that created the whole school safety framework? Who built it? What was the process like? And what did it make possible for youth and communities in Chicago?
So Communities United and VOYCE, we've been working for over 15 years around really uplifting holistic healing for ourselves and our communities and with young people, and doing that through taking action to change systems from ones that we believe harm young people and families to ones that are really rooted in a holistic ability to provide systems of care for youth and families. And so for us, when we started the organization, we were really focused on leadership development. How do we build power, take action, change systems, and really rooting that in our lived experience? And what we found pretty quickly over time is that through really hundreds of narratives of young people and families involved in our work, as well as ourselves as a survivor-led organization, that while the policy systems change wins were very exciting to us, what was kind of a deeper connection to the work was, again, this narrative around the collective healing that was occurred. So we were hearing over and over from young folks who had experienced extreme harm caused by systemic inequities, that the processes that we took through Communities United were not only life-changing, but life-saving. And so it took us some time to go through a really deep reflective process about what were the things that we were doing in our processes that really kind of promoted this pretty profound personal and collective healing. And so for us, through that trajectory of work over time, we were seeing, again, how young folks were taking action to change statewide policy around ending zero tolerance in Illinois. We were also able to change and transform the CPS school discipline policy. And then more recently, as you mentioned, we partner with Chicago Public Schools in advancing the Whole School Safety Initiative, which has reinvested over $10 million from policing into healing-centered approaches to safety, and is now expanding a youth-led framework for the holistic safety and well-being of young people across the district. And again, to achieve those types of really big transformations in systems, we have to be really rooted in how we're involving and caring for those who are most directly impacted. And so for us, we call that our healing through justice approach. Maybe I'd love to hear Meyiya talk about the process of mirrors, windows, and doors that we take, which is really focused on identity, community building, and finding purpose through action. And we believe that that's what kind of sustains us over the long haul through really difficult, challenging circumstances. You mentioned what we're going through right now in Chicago with the ICE raids is truly a collective trauma. It's just unbelievable what young people and their parents are having to go through right now. And so by centering healing, by really focusing on what makes us as individuals and communities whole as we're up against what can feel like insurmountable challenges, we're able to see again systems transform, but also young people like Meyiya, who started when they were 15 and are now 26, still finding healing in their ability to involve the next generation of young people that comes after them. So I think that's a really kind of inspiring arc of the work, in extremely challenging times. I think that's in many ways what keeps us going.
Yeah, and this piece of just real quick, I know you're going to tell us about the framework. Before you started with Communities United, did you feel like you had access to places where you felt loved and safe and where you had access to healing processes? I'm just curious where that was for you, and were any of those places in school or in local community organizations?
So honestly, before I started, I didn't feel like I had the access to these spaces. As a young person, it is so incredibly hard to find those spaces. Around that time, there weren't a lot of after school programs that talked about these things. There weren't a lot of places where young people would be able to go and just feel like they could be themselves. And something that really stood out to me about Communities United is how no matter where you came from, the identities that you held in a space, you were still welcomed with open arms, and it felt so much like a family to me. I was like, this is my place. This is where I need to be. And so I continue to feel that feeling. I even after, leaving Communities United and going somewhere else, I still did not feel that family feeling and felt like all of these people come from these different spaces and it feels like home. It didn't feel like that. I've only felt that here at Communities United, and young people have expressed that they felt the same things, and how their spaces, even today, there are no spaces, that are created like this. And so I definitely could say I didn't find that space until I came here, and I continue to find that space here.
That's beautiful. And now you make that space for other young people, right?
Definitely.
And so this framework is what helps, it sounds like. Can you tell us a little bit about your framework?
So basically, the Windows, Mirrors, and Doors framework is something that is truly an amazing framework that I've seen not only work for myself, but a lot of other young people when they go through this process. So we have mirrors, where it's you're recognizing your own identity. For example, myself, like I talked about before, I come from North Lawndale. I am this young African American woman coming from a neighborhood that is heavily rooted in lots of culture, but also there's a lot of downsides where we have gun violence, gang violence, substance abuse everywhere, and different things like that. And I come from this place where mental health and well-being is not really talked about. In my household, it was like, listen, what happens in my house stays in my house and it doesn't go outside of my house. But I had to really recognize my identity outside of the space that I was, living in, outside of my household, outside of my community. Who, was Meyiya? Who is Meyiya? And so I was able to come to Communities United, where I recognized, like, not only am I this African American young girl and I come from this community, but I carry this with me to a space where legislators need to hear my story. They need to hear who I am. And so I carry this into the spaces with other young people, and I'm able to connect my personal story to a lot of the things that we are talking about in the space. So that would be the mirrors part. And then we have windows, where not only did I recognize my own identity in these spaces, but now I'm recognizing the identity that I hold in my community. I'm a young person. I have a voice. I can change things. I can make things better. And then you have that is like recognizing, community. But now not only am I recognizing community, now I'm hitting the door. I'm not only opening the door for myself to recognize these things, but hold space and go into the community, but I'm also opening that door for other young people and recognizing my purpose outside of, the spaces that I've been in. And I'm able to have other young people do those same things and recognize their purposes. And so that is the door aspect, where, now you're able to go to these public meetings and public spaces and say, hey, we're going to organize something. We're going to do this, and it's going to be big. And even if it's not big, I can carry those 1 or 2 or 3 people with me, and we can make it bigger. And that has truly allowed me to create the space where there are 50 more Meyias and 50 more, Ramayas and Arianas and all of those things. And they're now creating that same space, and they're realizing their identities, and they're looking outside in their communities, and they're like, oh, this is something that is an issue, and this is something I can change. I have the voice and power to do so. And now they're creating those spaces for other young people. So those are the aspects of the windows, mirrors, and doors. And not only from my perspective, but other young people's perspective, because they have allowed me to be in this space and continue to create those spaces. And that allows them to get that light bulb and create those same spaces as well.
I love that. And I'm just imagining all of the magic that comes out of your city. And I'm a New Yorker, so we're not going to have the fight about whose pizza's better, Chicago or New York. We're not going to argue about the real birthplace, you know, freestyle and all the house music, all the things. But I do believe, and I know for a fact, that really magical, incredible organizing moments have happened and continue to happen. And so, Meyiya, can you tell me a story about a moment when you were looking to your right, to your left, you saw your fellow young people with you standing at the top of their power, pushing for some life-changing transformation for your city? Like when you felt the moment of, oh, we're about to win this victory, right? Tell me a story about that. And what did you win? What are you proud of? How did it feel?
Oh, Manuela, I have so many amazing stories throughout my time at Communities United and just throughout my organizing career in general. I think I would say one that has really, really stood out to me is we have a young organizer by the name of Dariana Ford. I have been just truly fascinated by her in general, just the way that she first started off to now and her creating, these powerful spaces. But one being, I remember when Dariana, she didn't talk much. Her first organizer was just like, hey, we need to work together to get Dariana to talk. She is not a big talker. We need to figure out, like, what is she interested in? And I was like, you know what? I want to do it. Like, I'm going to talk to her. I'm very shy. So I'm just like, how am I going to bring her out of her shell if I'm also shy? And so I remember us being in one of these meetings where we were just really, getting to know the young people, building some really intentional relationships. And one of the questions were, in this time, what is something that has been a challenge for you and how would you want someone to support? And she was like, no, I don't want to answer that. Skip me. And I was like, let's sit into this space for a moment and let's really think about, do you really want us to skip you? Like, have you ever had anyone even ask you that question? And she's like, honestly, no. And I was like, so if you could talk to someone that you really missed in the room right now, what would you tell them? And she was just like, I would talk to my grandfather. And she was like, honestly, I would tell him that in this time, losing him was really a challenge for me. But when I come to this space, it makes me forget about that time. And then everyone was like, wait, she shared. And I'm like, yeah. And it's really about asking those questions. But not only did she share, she brought her friend to the space and he noticed his purpose. And before she even brought him to the space, she went to this police accountability meeting where she had told the officer, listen, we as young people, it's hard for us to see you in our space and we need to think about building relationships. And she brought up the fact that the question that I asked her, and she was just like, hey, my organizer asked me this question. I've been wanting someone to ask me how I've been for a long time. And because no one asked me that, I'm not able to share. And she was like, after the meeting, we debriefed because we do a lot of debriefs. And she was like, listen, I want to create these spaces and I want to tell all my friends. And after that, she brought her friend. And next thing you know, he wanted to create spaces. And that then moved on to when George Floyd, everything was going on with the pandemic and George Floyd and all of those things. And I watched all of those same young people who were very quiet and who came into the space and just was like, skip me, are now in the front. Hey, we need to make sure that young people feel supported. We need equitable education. And I'm just like, wait a minute. I remember in these different meetings where you all weren't talking. And so for me, that's when I really was able to realize that young people are just like how I was, like just looking for a space where even that intentional conversation can turn into something big where you realize your purpose. And that was a time for me where it was really powerful. In that moment, I know that a lot was going on where young people had so much, anger within them because they were like, we need to do something. And watching that anger and sadness turn into power by them even just getting out to City Hall and marching and creating this space for each other and saying, hey, we need whole school safety as a thing in our schools, and you all need to support us, and you need to create a safe and equitable school and equitable education for us. And the fact that they were able to organize themselves and call up Representative Ford and all of those people and say, hey, we need you all to come out here because this is something that's very important. That was truly a powerful moment for me, and it made me really continue to say, I know that, a lot of our futures are very bright because of these young people, and that would be my powerful moment.
I love that. The power that you exercise, that you awaken in young people, that they're going to carry with them as a knowing of themselves and their purpose, and knowing how to exercise that power for the greater good. That's a lifetime gift, right? And Jenny, I'm curious because, you mentioned me, I mentioned that George Floyd, right? Rest in peace and power. And there was a time when we used to say, hey, we don't need police in schools. And it felt like a pipe dream, right? People were like, yeah, absolutely, we don't want that. And that feels so big and impossible. And through the organizing and the process of like really awakening young people's power, community power, y'all made that a reality. So can you tell us a little bit about like that journey of achieving that victory? And then the coalition and alliances that you had to build with community in Chicago, the organizations, stakeholders. Like, how did you do that? And what did you learn about bringing lots of people together to push for something that felt impossible maybe at some point?
Yeah, so I think one of the key things that comes to mind is just the long arc and commitment that it takes to be able to create such a big transformation, especially in a district like, Chicago Public Schools, but really anywhere in the country. This journey started for us organizationally, in 2005. And to think we're in 2025 now, so 20 years of work leading up to this. And it really started with rooms of young people like Meyiya is describing, talking about their lived experience and talking about the challenges of being pushed out of school and being funneled into the school to prison pipeline. And so when I think back and I take myself back to the rooms of young people in 2005, 2006, at that point, they were doing youth-led participatory action research to really be able to not only ground themselves in their own lived experience, but to become researchers and engagers of the broader community of young people in Chicago, to really understand how folks across the city were being impacted and the perspectives that they were bringing. And all of that work led to not only really powerful kind of analysis of the systems at play and what needed to change, but also one of the really powerful things that came out of it was young people really identifying how they and their peers were in many ways carrying that burden on themselves. So before young people really understood the systems at play, folks carry around with them this feeling like, the problems are their fault or the fault of their families and their communities. And through that really kind of rigorous process of engaging with each other and doing strategic analysis, it kind of lifted that burden and also opened up a new door to really seeing themselves as folks who could actually be participating in changing the systems that in many ways had perpetuated harm against them. And so based on the power of that work, again, it took many, many years. Young people have been wanting police out of their schools and holistic forms of safety, for a very long time. We built coalitions with other organizations working with young people, with parents, with universities, with policy groups who all had kind of a similar mission of wanting to ensure that young people were supported and felt safe in schools. It took really leveraging power at the city, state, national level to be able to build momentum. We were at the point where, with our head of safety and security in Chicago Public Schools, Jadine Chow, for many years, we had been pushing from the outside to be able to get her to just listen and hear from young folks. What are the problems and what are the solutions we need? And at that point in time, there had been some resistance and some cooperation, but over the past few years, kind of a big kind of opportunity opened up where she really had a new outlook on what the possibilities were to really transform the school district's approach, and also really recognizing the harm that was caused by the existing approach. And so together we created what we've been calling the Whole School Safety Initiative, where Communities United and four other community-based organizations formed a steering committee to really provide strategic direction to the district on how to have a participatory process that would engage youth and parents in actually voting on how dollars should be spent.
Jenny, can you talk a little bit about who the orgs were and the way they played their roles in the coalition?
Absolutely. So one of the groups was Community Organizing on Family Issues, Kofi Power Pack. And so they do a lot of work with parents across the district around restorative justice. Another group is Mikva Challenge, which does a lot of work around youth civic engagement and empowerment. Build on the west side of Chicago does a lot of powerful youth development work and support around mental health for young people. And the Arc of St. Sabina also does powerful work with young people around restorative justice and other issues. So those were the groups that made up the Whole School Safety Steering Committee. And then beyond that, there were many organizations who played a role in ongoing organizing and movement building through police-free schools and other coalition efforts. So when we think about the type of coalitions that are needed to create this type of change, it is truly an ecosystem of work that needs to happen. And for us, that meant, the decades of work, organizing, building power and alliance building, but then also taking an opportunity when there was someone in a district who wanted to partner with us to actually make that change come to reality.
And you all forge deep relationships with folks in various types of places, like your partnership with the Children's Hospital, for example. So just this idea of it's going to take all of us from all the different sectors that we're in to actually transform. There's a lot of threats to safety right now for young people and families. And there's also a lot of opportunities that really come from the persistence, to your point, of organizers, right? So can you give the audience advice on how to orient to the challenges that we're facing now? So what is a challenge? What's your take on a challenge to safety and to youth and communities? And then what advice would you give the listener around how to prepare and what action they should take regarding that?
I think something that you had talked about was our partnership with the Children's Hospital. And then one of the things about that was through our Ujima work, we created a mental health pipeline in our work with our young men, and we connected that to not only healing, but to the leadership of young people. And it shows, systemic change isn't just about policy, but it's also about creating pathways for youth to thrive. And so with that being said, I think that it is really important that we don't just stop here. When we think about systems, we think about all the systems that, youth are a part of, youth and their families, and how we can continue to see young people as an asset to their communities, as an asset to, the systems that they're a part of, and really allow for young people to show that leadership by creating spaces where young people can be a part of decision making. And I think that when we think about the challenges and we think about how important it is, to meet young people where they're at, because the reality is our communities are really suffering in this time. And it's very important to really look to the young people as to say, we're asking you, what do you need in this time? What supports are really, important for you and your families. And it's very important for us to start looking at young people as leaders in our decision-making tables. And that's some advice that I would give folks, because young people are the ones who are going to really lead that generational change and lead us to greatness. And if we want to continue to create these spaces, we need to make sure young people are the ones that are a part of those tables and a part of those spaces.
Thank you, Meyiya. What about you, Jenny? What's your take on what is here and what it might come in our communities, and what advice would you give to folks listening? What action would you want people to take?
I think the action, I completely agree with Meyiya that it's really about centering young people in decision making and leadership, and also being in an intergenerational relationship, because we know that that's how communities really thrive. I think that also really being nimble and going to people. So again, we can't kind of overstate the trauma that is happening right now, in Chicago specifically. I mean, just this week again, there have been a large number of detentions of individuals at the time when parents are just trying to drop off their kids to school. And there are rapid response teams out, you know what I mean? There's Know Your Rights work. People are out in the streets working to keep our communities safe. And despite that, we're not able to stop everything, right? And so, we see many families not sending their kids to school right now, staying home out of fear, and the uncertainty and really terrifying environment that's been created. So I think it's up to us all to be going to people, to finding folks where they're at, to be able to support folks in their natural kind of networks and where they can kind of connect and play a role, because we're up against a lot right now, and we have to stay connected, and we have to make sure that our communities are safe.
Thank you, Meyiya, Jenny, for taking the time out of your really busy lives, holding a lot of people down, developing a lot of brilliant leaders in your local community to transform systems, to transform the energy and spaces, to create loving, healing spaces for folks to come to and know that it's their return place. Like you said, Meyiya, this is my home, and I will keep coming back here. And so we just want to thank you both for taking the time out and send you so much strength and blessings and encouragement. For those of you listening, please invest in Communities United and VOYCE. Where can they find you, Jenny? What's your website and how can they support?
Folks can find us at www.communitiesunited.org and also www.voiceproject.org. And we'd love to hear from you and connect.
Thank you for joining us, y'all. Be well. That was Jenny Arwarde and Meyiya Coleman from VOYCE and Communities United, CU. By the time you hear this episode, the federal government would have launched a full-scale attack on the city of Chicago, which included deploying the National Guard. The feds have also denied Chicago federal education dollars for protecting their Black Student Achievement Plan. They launched Operation Midway Blitz, a series of full-scale ICE raids, which did everything from kidnapping preschool teachers at a daycare center to separating immigrant and African-American families alike in the South Shore housing complex. Businesses, labor unions, and community members have joined the mayor's call to action to use legal, administrative law, and community solidarity to block the feds' attempt to punish Chicago for upholding the Constitution and defending the human rights of its residents. Businesses around Chicago are currently displaying posters calling for all hands off Chicago, and community members are hosting walking school buses to accompany children to and from school safely. Chicago's community is strong, and their organizers are strategically building alliances. VOYCE and CU are shining examples of how youth can redefine our collective notion of safety and use their vision to make allies out of system leaders. They called in former Chief of Safety and Security of Chicago Public Schools, J. Dean Chow, and organizers and allies in coalition like CU, VOYCE, and Kofi set the stage for the creation and implementation of a framework that allowed Chicago to remove police from public schools. That system leader, J. Dean Chow, was made a champion of their work through their persistent organizing of youth and caregivers. The framework then enabled a shift from punitive responses to those rooted in healing and care. This is what you call stellar co-governance in action. Co-governance is when communities, along with system leaders, help reshape governmental policies, cultures, behaviors, and actions to those that are directed and rooted in the community's vision. Their work, they rekindled the community's belief in democracy, one that works and serves those impacted. In a time when public systems are being torn down and demolished, organizers are rebuilding public systems to reflect the new abolitionist worlds they want to see. Leaning into the power of creativity and collective action, they guide us towards the transformation of public systems to become truly accountable to community. Finally, a note on CU's commitment to healing and mental health. Next year, CU will be facilitating CJSF's community of practice, committed to increasing the mental health and healing of young people in 3 to 5 states. To make good on a promise of transforming our nation and putting us on a path towards a truth and reconciliation process that accounts for centuries of colonization, institutionalized racism, and divestment, we have to start with the work of repair and healing at the center. Healing in ourselves, in our organizations, in the way our public systems like public schools are organized, and between community and government. Turning pain into power, Meyiya showed us that there's always hope and restoration beyond grief and violence. As she honors her grandmother's legacy work to end gun violence, Meyiya and VOYCE remind us that other youth also want to be a part of the collective change process. They also want to turn despair into hope. This is the transformative power of base-building organizing groups who engage youth to lead the coalitional and cross-sectoral alliances required to transform schools and communities according to our values, those of healing, collective power, and justice. Thanks for listening. Our pod was produced by Phil Circus and CJSF with the support of our organizing partners and our donor members. Please like, subscribe, and share our pod with someone else looking to support the powerful role that young people play in movements for education, justice, and liberation. Thank you.